Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where we talk with normal, everyday people about their experiences of mental health. I'm really pleased to welcome today Matt Mason-Hames, who's going to talk to us about his experiences of mental health. We're going to have a lovely conversation about the journey he's been on through his life and understanding of what mental health is all about. So, Matt, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for calling me normal.
There you go. We're all normal, right? Nobody's abnormal. So I'm going to do my introduction to Matt as I know him. I know a little bit about his background experiences. I do also want to put out the caution that says, we will get into some potentially challenging conversations. We might talk about some things that are quite, difficult to talk about at times. So I just want to make sure everybody is taking the right protection from themselves. If you feel uncomfortable with any of the conversations at any time, feel free to stop listening. Okay, so just wanted to share that with you up front. So Matt and I met a couple of years ago, I guess. I can't even remember the day. And we met in a coffee shop in Camberley. I won't name the brand, but we met up to chat all things mental health. There is a mutual friend that introduced us to each other, thinking that we were both on the same sort of journey. And I guess in many ways we are. So it's fascinating. I've met Matt. We met for that coffee. We had a lovely chat about mental health, and we've stayed in touch ever since. We've done a few things together, and it's just great to introduce him into this conversation. Matt also is a family man, very similar to myself, with wife and children, and it's lovely to have met Matt and to have continued this conversation to this point where today we get the chance to chat for the population of people that want to listen to us talk about all different stuff. So Matt, pleasure. Introduce yourself. Your turn. Your time to shine.
Well, thanks for having me. As I said, you've done the introduction and how we met. So yeah, I'm Matt. I'm in my 40s, hitting the middle. I live with my wife and my two stepkids. They're from her previous marriage. We're both in our second marriages, and we live in a quiet little village in Surrey, and it's lovely. So I used to live in the town that Matt lives in. I used to be now, so that's how we know. We have a mutual friend, and when I started my journey into learning more about mental health, we were introduced, and Matt's been a great source of information and comfort and help since, really. So how did I get so I run Mindset, which is a mental health training consultancy, very similar to what Matt does, and I guess I got into my journey learning more about mental health probably around 5 years ago, when I was studying for health and safety. I wanted a career change. I started looking at health and safety as an option. It's something I'd always done, but not really invested much in the education of. So we had, and as part of one of the qualifications, had to write an essay around the company I was working for at the time, and their health and safety policies and procedures, and what we thought we could do better, what we couldn't. And at the time, my father was diagnosed with lung cancer. Unfortunately, it was terminal. And my brother also worked at the company. And we had two very, very different experiences with our line managers around how that was handled. So I decided to look at how the company helped people with not necessarily looking after themselves physically, but how they looked after themselves mentally. And I went down that sort of journey, and that really raised some interesting points for me. And I realized that as a society, not just that company at the time, but as a society, we invested a lot in looking after people's physical health, but very little around looking after the body as a whole, and making sure that people were in the right frame of mind. People knew what they had the same sort of access to physical health as they would do to mental health help, and they didn't. So that led me to become a mental health first aider. That inspired me to become a mental health first aid instructor. That's then inspired me to set up Mindset Sport, which we may or may not come onto later, and go down this route. So that's how I kind of got into it, really.
Well, there you go. So thanks. Many promos for your business there, which is great. That's what this is all about as well, by the way. This isn't just about my business, but Mindset is a great organisation, and you're right. You do things with different communities as well. And we will talk about the sport things. I do want to make sure we cover that too, because you're very sort of ingrained into some of these thoughts of how to support more men in particular in sport, and I think that's just incredible. So it is a pleasure to have you. let's start with the big question. So tell us your journey with mental health, if that's okay.
Yeah, so I look back now and realise it started much, much earlier. But I guess my first diagnosis was with around depression and anxiety was in my early to mid 20s, I guess, which was a very different time to have mental health problems, mental health issues, whatever you want to call them, or to have a mental health diagnosis of illness. It was a tough time to sort of, to be able to sort of turn around. I went to the doctor and said, I'm not feeling great. I'm knackered. I've got no motivation. I've got none of this. I'm just exhausted all the time. And much of the conversation was, well, you're depressed. Take these. Gave me a prescription. And that was it. That I was like, okay, so no advice, no help, no anything about what to expect, how to go forwards, all the things that we try and do now with people, and that sort of led to an up and down relationship with the tablets I was on, and so on and so forth. And I did attempt to take my life probably about 4 or 5 years later after that first diagnosis, which really profoundly affected a lot of people I know, a lot of people who were involved, my family. And it was a bit of a wake-up call for me as well, as around, wow, this is actually a real thing. This is actually something that I need to learn to live with, learn to accept, and understand a little bit more. So I kind of became very open about, about my mental health and about the diagnosis I had. So it kind of then streamed into things, and I've been very lucky that my group of friends are very understanding and very, very open and accepting of it. I look back over things I've done, behaviours I've exhibited, and all those sorts of things. I go, wow, I was a bit of a knob, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Because I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand what was driving those behaviours. So yeah, I look back and I have I have some very, very patient friends in my circle who have endured some spectacular things, and the fact that they're still around is amazing. So I thank them all. But yeah, I look back now with that wisdom of age and that clarity of thought that I think we touched on earlier on in a private chat, didn't we? That you sort of go, if only I'd known, or if only I'd experienced. So, and that kind of drives me on, and that's the kind of experiences I want to share with people as part of what I do now. And what I want to do more is just trying to impart that wisdom that 25 years of living with depression, anxiety, knowing the peaks and pits that come with it, and how I can help other people. Really, it's and that's predominantly why I've trying to move into the world of mental health training. I want to be able to teach people to understand what goes on in people's heads, I guess. Yeah.
And you've got that real lived experience, and it's one of the valuable commodities of an instructor with lived experience is that reality of I can talk to you from my perspective, and I'm a big fan of this thought that says we all have our own independent, unique perspectives. Not one of us can see things the same way, and we might have the same opinions about things, but we see things and feel things very differently. It's fascinating to hear you talking, Matt, and I really appreciate you being so candid and honest so quickly, in these conversations. This is what this is about, right? This is about having a forum or an opportunity for anybody to talk about their experience and their story, because these are things that you've shared that probably not a lot of people would know about you. And you mentioned something quite important in there. Well, not quite, but very important, about your friends. I do want to just touch on that just a second, just to hear a little bit more about how did your friends find out, firstly, and how did they react in the first instance? What was the general reaction from people?
I've never shied away from saying that I've had a diagnosis of depression and anxiety.
Okay. Yeah.
So if people want to talk to me about it, then they will. And I've had conversations with people since when, now that I've become more open and more talking about, people used to talk about, oh, that mood Matt used to get into.
Mhm.
I'm like, I didn't know I used to get into that mood. So they'd already spotted it. They already knew. They knew something was up. Whether or not they put two and two together, or whether or not I'd allowed them to put two and two together, I was never afraid of talking about it, but I wasn't actually open and honest, I don't think. So if somebody, so people have sort of said, oh, that mood that Matt used to get into. Yeah. And I think in hindsight, it's a reflection of my low mental health at the time, lots of other bits and pieces. So I most of my friends and most of my associates found out when I attempted to take my life.
Right.
That was kind of the, oh wow,
Serious
moment, and that was it for me as well. It was that kind of like, I can't hide away from this anymore. I can't put it to the background and pretend it doesn't happen. It's kind of got to its pinnacle, and this is where it's at. And and so a lot of people found out like that, and and I tried to be open and honest, but I guess until very recently I wouldn't openly discuss it, but if somebody wanted to know about it, I would. But now I'm an advocate. I will turn around. It's not the first thing I talk about with people. And likewise, if I don't turn around and go, oh, I've got a broken leg and a broken arm and a broken finger, but if that conversation crops up, then I'll talk about it. But I am pushing. I do try and talk about it a lot more in a group situation, and help other people understand what it's like, I guess.
And that can only be applauded, Matt, because the reality is these are hard things for anybody to hear, and obviously for the person who's struggling or been through it to talk about as well. So kudos to you, and well done for sharing that message and really helping to sort of shine a light on some of these topics that are very challenging for people. And as I said at the beginning of this, if you feel uncomfortable with this conversation, this is real. This is a real conversation about real stuff that happens to real, normal, everyday people like Matt or I or whoever's on these conversations. It's such an important message, Matt. It really is.
It's one of those messages that I'm very fortunate, and a group of my friends. I play rugby, which is not necessarily a sport you associate with vulnerability, should I say. But thankfully my old rugby club were really, really understanding, and they would talk to me about this, and it's amazing the stories that open up when you open up. Other people talk to you. And my current rugby club, we've got a well-being program that a couple of us are working on, myself with a guy called Danny Leeds and the coaches. So we've actually moving on another step from just being open and honest about it, to actively encouraging conversations. And I looked at the website the other day, the rugby club website the other day, and the entire front page, because we can't play rugby at the moment, was just full of wellness tips. How to cope with lockdown, how to bits and pieces around financial well-being, physical well-being. It's not just about the mental health side of it, it's just about well-being as a whole. We did a piece on alcohol awareness and all those sorts of things. So the whole front page of our rugby club page was about looking after yourself, which is unusual, I think.
It's so needed, isn't it? It's such a needed resource for, especially when you can't do the thing. And I've had many conversations, I'm sure you have too, about the impact not being able to do the thing you enjoy the most is having on people. As a rugby player, you rely on having 30 players on a field, or if my numbers are right, I'm not sure if it's 30, is it that?
Yeah, 15 aside, probably.
15 aside.
But we're not playing, we need more, because obviously I'm not very fit. So I do about 10 minutes, then I'm off.
Substitutes on the side, but so you're used to playing on a field with so many other players, and to be then stood down from that and can't do it, it's almost like the injury effect, isn't it? You can't play and you're injured and you're just really not allowed to get out there and do it. It's a hard one. That's incredible that you have this. What is the rugby club? What's the website?
It's Hazelmere Community Rugby Club, and they and my previous rugby club was, and I'm not going to they kind of allowed me to express, and that was Overton, so just around the corner from you.
Ooh.
So Overton Rugby Club, I played for the second team there, and they were really, really brilliant and accepting. And I think sport is changing, sport is accepting and understanding that there is a need to look after the health as a whole. It's not just you. There is still a massive focus on the physical health. You training twice a week, whatever, 3 times a week, playing the game. Are we at the point where we have a mental health training session once a week or a mental health session once a week? No, we're not. And do we want that? I don't know. People do things for different reasons. But just to have that acknowledgement in that space that they're committed to looking after the whole person, not just the bit rugby, not just the size of your shoulders and the strength of your legs. It's about and there is the correlation obviously about mindset, sports mindset, and the big rugby clubs and the big sports clubs and all the professional clubs have sports psychologists. They deal with all of that, and they will get you in the right. Local grassroots sports clubs don't have that facility. You're lucky if you get an unmuddy pitch on a winter to go out and play. Don't have the facilities to do that. So it's those sorts of conversations are really important to have, and especially with the lower down, in my opinion. The lower down of the kids, if you can ingrain that sort of ethos around whole body health to the coaches with the kids, it stops people growing up. It's a lot easier to teach a kid to have the right emotional responses than it is to try and fix an adult who's 20, 30, 40 years into having the same emotional responses, and trying to change those is tough. It's hard work. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can, but it takes a lot more work.
We're at that age, of course, where we already know it all, and we don't need changing, until we crash. And I think that's one of the challenges, isn't it? It's that sort of realization. I find it fascinating. I've had a couple of these conversations where sort of the crash moment, the hard moment where things went wrong, is sort of that moment of almost enlightenment of actually the values that I have in life, the things that I find, are more valuable to me. And I'm not talking about monetary, I'm talking about sort of the realization that family and friends and community is such an important aspect of mental health, and actually mental wealth in many ways. You hear those terms too, right? You've started, and I want to sort of delve a little bit deeper into this sports thought, because this is an interesting conversation. You're obviously very passionate about sort of encouraging more discussions around mental health across sport in the work you do. So you have launched something recently, haven't you? So talk about your stuff with Mindset Sport.
So Mindset is my vehicle for training, but I kind of realised that, as I just sort of alluded to, that grassroots and community sports clubs don't have facilities to deal with mental health issues. They might not have mental health first aiders in place, and if they do, where do they go to get their resources? We're lucky at Hazelmere. We've got 2 mental health first aiders. There's myself, who deals with the adults, and then there's Danny, who's got the children's qualification, so the youth qualification. So we're experiencing that, but you might not be as a coach, you might not be as a leader, you might not be as a parent, or as a player. So what I've kind of done is I'm trying to put everything in one place. It's not advice, it's people to go to for advice. Do you know what I mean? So the Samaritans are on there, and I know you're heavily involved in the Samaritans. So there's a click-through link to get to them. There's a click-through link to get to Shout. There's a click-through link to a couple of talking groups that I know of that have come on board, Blokes and Man Gang. But it's not just but I want to go down the route of nutrition. I want to get PTs involved. So there's physical injury prevention tips on there. I want to, there's access to financial information and those sorts of things. So I want it to be a sort of a one-stop shop note, so that no matter what's bothering you or whatever is causing the problems, it's you've got one place you can go as a coach, as a leader, as a mental health first aider, as an individual, as a parent, and you can just go, right, I need to find out what's happening. So I click on that page, Mindset Sport, because all the information is out there. it's all out there. It's just finding it that's a minefield. You know, you type anything into Google and you end up with 15 million pages of nonsense.
Yeah.
So I've tried to distill it down, basically. And I suppose my goal is that it touches every single amateur sports club out there. If it does, it does. But if it helps, if I've as we were discussing earlier on, you kind of get that bee in your bonnet and you do it. So if a couple of days or nights of editing and hunting and using the information that I know, and putting it out onto a website helps just one person, then fine, brilliant. I'm done. I'm happy. It's been taken on by a few people already, which is brilliant news. And they've shared it with their members. But so long as it helps, and if there are any contributors out there, Matt, if you wanted to write a little bit for me, I don't know, around stuff and bits and pieces that you do in around where you live, because obviously the more local the better, as we know. So it's there as a completely free resource. All I ask is that you give me your email address so that I can send you more information and keep you updated when new stuff comes out. That's it.
Brilliant.
So that's what I'm trying to do with it. It's not sports psychology. It's not anything else. It's just a one-stop shop that says, you know what, if I know someone or see someone or I want to learn more about signs and symptoms, then I can go there and look it up. It's not opinion. It's not my opinion. There might be some blogs, but it is just directing you to people like mine, to Samaritans, to all the charities, all the big help, Bupa and all those sorts of pieces. So it's there. You can find it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's such an important resource, and it will grow as people share it and support it. So, I really want to encourage anybody listening, if you're involved with community sports clubs or whatever they might be, charities, etc., please, do make sure that you cover this as a key part of that ongoing sort of development and evolution of the programs. Ultimately, for me, the way I see sport is it's encouraging education around understanding, when you do sport, the benefits it has to you mentally, in terms of, not every time you lose, you're going to be happy, of course, but that's still part of a learning journey that says, if you won every game and you're excellent at everything and excelled at everything, it's almost like, well, where's the pinnacle? Where's better than that? And I think there's so much work that can be done. A lot of clubs do have welfare officers, and it's sort of just taking that and adding being and stuff like that to it, isn't it? The human elements and emotional support.
Most clubs have a welfare officer, but it's for them. If they experience or come across something like that, they've got somewhere to go. They can find the information out that they need. That's and it's trial and error. It's not perfect yet, but I'd like it to be. So if people do jump on and have a look, shameless plug, mate.
Shameless plug away. So long as you're not endorsing some sort of drinking thing.
I've got my
Christmas tea. Your Christmas tea.
I'm all Christmased up for you.
You've done really well. I feel really favored on this Christmas. The thing is, this podcast is going out in March, so it's not going to be. No, it's not.
Idiot, then,
well, sometimes we have to make fool of ourselves, right? But no, we'll put it out before Christmas. Don't worry about that. So we've got a few more minutes just to sort of talk over anything else you want to cover. Anything else you want to talk about in particular? Any other shameless plugs you want to chuck in there? Obviously, make it.
No, I've done enough plugging. Thank you very much.
Make it.
No, I think I don't know what to talk. It's you don't want to go over the same old stuff on these sorts of things, do you? No. Otherwise, you end up with What do you want to talk about? What are your thoughts? Come on, put you on the spot for a minute.
Wow, nobody's ever asked me my thoughts. I got loads of thoughts. Mental health is something we all have. That's the key, isn't it? We all have to take care of our own mental health well-being, and there's so many amazing people out there doing their bit. This is the reality. There is not one thing that fixes or solves this big issue. And what you're doing with, I reflect on what you've said about your mindset sports pieces. There's so many great organizations. I think that's what we always have to remember. Yeah, you're a small company, I'm a small company. That doesn't mean we can't work together and collaborate and support each other. And I think that's, for me, the learning from this year has been very much about this exact thing, which is don't sit in silence. Don't sit on your own. Don't try to work your way through this current storm of challenges alone. And I think it's a great analogy for how, as humans, we need to evolve. And that's sort of my thought, I think.
I like the idea of collaboration, because there is, I guess, and it is I've got very short amount of time for any stuff for another meeting, sorry about this, but there is a danger that the wellbeing industry becomes a bit like the diet industry.
Yeah.
And I do worry about that, in the fact that we start pulling bits out and talking nonsense, quite frankly, about it, and people do pick an area and focus on that, and then it takes a tangent, and we end up with so many different competing ideas that rather than banding together and going, let's just try and make it better for everyone, rather than going, no, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, no, this is what you need to do. And
everyone's on their own individual journey, and I think that's the key, isn't it? It's that sort of uniqueness. Everybody needs something slightly different. There's lots of things out there. We are going to wrap this up now, and sort of say our closing points. And I just want to say, from my side, Matt, it's brilliant. I love having conversations with you. It's lovely to catch up with you. I think you wanted to talk to me half an hour every week or something. That's what you said so we'll make that magic happen as well if we need to. It's been fab. I just really appreciate everything you're doing. Mindset, I wish it well. I hope you thrive and fly. Hope the sports stuff gets picked up by everybody. Anybody that's listening, please do, go and check it out. It's such an important part of communities and all those things. We could talk about millions of things, actually, Matt. I think that's the challenge, isn't it? Put it all into a little package. What do you want to say, mate? Over to you. You to close.
Thanks for having me. And don't I guess, be open, be honest, have those conversations. And the stigma is going, and it will go the more we talk about it. And this is probably just the same as everybody else says, but we need to talk about it. We need to do something about it. Let's not fight each other and compete. Let's work together and make sure that this actually happens. And thanks for having me. And like I said, I could talk for hours, and you can talk for hours, and I think we have done this morning. And
it's been a long with
we've been talking about. So I thank you for doing this. This is great. I love you. I love what you're doing. MH2, MH squared, whatever you want to call it. I think it's a great idea.
On another video for people what that means. It's so critical, Matt, and it's such a great conversation. I really appreciate your candidacy. I appreciate your honesty, and you're genuine and authentic. And these are unscripted. We don't have a script. We did try 5 times to get this thing started, because that's the problem when it's unedited and unscripted. I keep forgetting stuff, and of course I always will. That's the reality of this world. You know what? We're not perfect. None of us will ever be. So thank you so much. If anybody is struggling, you do need some support, or if there's any other conversations that you need to have, please know you're not on your own. There are always people to talk to. I know Matt or I are both available if you ever wanted to chat to us. But of course, you can contact Samaritans. Obviously, I'm a massive fan of Samaritans. Samaritans is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on 116 123. It's free to call. It offers a safe and confidential environment for you to be able to talk about those things that are worrying you. So from me, thank you so much, Matt. And we'll do the final goodbyes, and I will speak to you soon. Take care.
The Zoom wave. Bye.
Zoom wave, yeah.